minutes, you will learn a great deal about these creatures and hopefully come away with a fresh, new understanding and a new appreciation for their role in our world. Bob Popwell is an avid outdoorsman and herpetologist. Snake hunting and collecting throughout North America for the past 25 years has given him many opportunities to study and observe reptiles in a true cross-section of their many environments. Mr. Popwell holds a master's degree and now is the owner of the Brazos River Rattlesnake Ranch, where continued research and a focal point for education related to snakes can take place. Many of the more than 2,000 species and subspecies of snakes throughout the world live in North America, and many of these generate a great deal of interest from the media, as well as from those people who happen to run into a snake in the great outdoors. Now sit back and enjoy the exciting real world of snakes.
One of the first things that we do in a tape like this is spend a lot of time talking about the poisonous species, and in a few minutes you're going to see some of the examples of the 4 poisonous species that live in this part of the country. But I want to start out too by showing you a large specimen of a western diamondback rattlesnake. This big guy here weighed about 16 pounds when he was live. This is a huge rattlesnake, as you can see in perspective to my body here. He is enormous. This snake was 6.5 feet long and has a girth on him, like many people exaggerate, as big around as the top of your leg. But this was a snake that was live on our display here for many months and literally died of old age. He was probably 20 or 25 years old and quite an impressive specimen for the western diamondback. But here on our live display we have cottonmouth water moccasins, we have copperheads, and of course several species of rattlesnakes, and the coral snake. All 4 of those snakes are the only poisonous species that live here in North America and are quite common in this area of Texas. We're going to spend a lot of time talking and looking at some of those too directly. However, right now let me start out by continuing to answer some of the common questions that we get asked when we're doing snake shows throughout the country. One thing that impresses people with snakes, they want to know, are they slimy and wet like they've heard about? Believe it or not, most people have never touched a real snake. And the answer to that is no, snakes are not wet and slimy. Most snakes are very dry and sandpaper feeling. They're scaly. They feel like a very rough piece of sandpaper, and in no way are they wet and slimy at all. Of course, a snake coming out of the water has a more wet and slimy look, but snakes are very dry by nature and are not slimy at all. One of the other questions we often get asked is, what do these snakes eat? Here at our live exhibit, we have many species on display, and they must be fed and maintained. Snakes have no capacity to chew their food like you and I do, nor can they take bites out of it one at a time. They have to swallow it all in one piece, all at one time, and in a minute you'll be able to see what it's like for a snake to consume some of his food. It's rather graphic, but that's nature at its very best. Snakes, therefore, have to eat something small enough to be swallowed whole and small enough to be handled by them and their offensive weapons. In the case of a rattlesnake, copperhead, and water moccasin, they have a venomous bite, and therefore their offensive weapon is to help them capture their food by injecting a little bit of venom. In the non-poisonous snakes, we have those snakes that are constrictors, like the bull snake here. This pet bull snake is just like the boa constrictor or the python. He wraps around his victim and squeezes it until suffocation occurs, and then swallows it whole, again not chewing his food at all like no snake does. The coach whips and some of the faster species of snakes rely on speed to capture their food and often pick up the small animal and bang it or push it against the ground until it's addled and can be swallowed whole. Now, I know you can hear one of my specimens that just cranked up here and began to rattle, so we'll go ahead and take this opportunity to hear what a real rattlesnake sounds like and take a look at some of the defense mechanisms of the rattlesnake. But before that, let me emphasize, as I said earlier, if you leave a snake alone, he's going to go out of his way to leave you alone too. They're not aggressive. They're not going to try to attack you. Without a doubt, most rattlesnakes do not rattle when you get close to them. As a matter of fact, they simply try to use their camouflage more times than not. If you get too close, or if you break that personal space that the snake has defined as his area, then he will rattle, hiss, rear up, suck in air, look as big and as mean as he possibly can, trying to scare you away from him. And if the scare doesn't work, if you don't bluff down, then the snake is going to try to attack you and bite you to protect himself. But remember, a snake can only strike about 1/2 of his total body length, give or take a few inches. He can't leap in the air at all like they do in the movies with a string attached to a special effects man. Instead, he has to be on the ground because he's affected by gravity just like you and I. The higher he strikes or the farther he strikes, the more vulnerable he is to getting hit on the head, grabbed by another animal, stepped on, or hurt. And so he knows that, and most rattlesnakes take very short defensive strikes and get back cocked, ready for a second or third strike. Let's take up the one that's making so much noise here and see if he'll cooperate this morning up here on top of the stand. Now, this is a real rattlesnake in action. You notice he's constantly trying to back away from me and escape. He'll do everything he can to keep from getting into a fight mode with me. I think you can hear that rattler pretty good on the microphone now, but we'll give you a better shot at that too. But you notice the snake is doing nothing aggressive at this point. Even though this is a wild rattlesnake that was just caught, he is simply trying to get off the counter and get out of the limelight and escape. And he will spend a great deal of his time trying to back up on us here today. But this snake is a western diamondback rattlesnake. Said we weren't going to use any fancy scientific names, but this is a Crotalus atrox, and this is probably the most common species of rattlesnake in the United States. They're very common in this area. The large snake you saw earlier is of this species right here. But it's interesting to know that there are 26 different species of rattlesnakes in the United States and in South America. They don't all look like this snake at all. Some of the other kinds of rattlesnakes you may have heard about would be the timber rattlesnake. Everyone's heard of a sidewinder rattlesnake. Some people have heard of a pygmy rattlesnake, a rock rattlesnake, Pacific rattlesnake, prairie rattlesnake, eastern diamondback. This particular type, the western diamondback, is often referred to as a coontail rattlesnake. You can see the black and white rings around the tail of the snake that give it that local name. So many snakes have local names that we often forget what their true scientific or common name is. Okay, we have here a copperhead. It's very interesting that more people are probably concerned about the poisonous species than the non-poisonous kind. The copperhead is a very beautiful snake. He's also a very quick snake, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about these so that you can learn the difference between this snake and the many snakes that mimic the poisonous species. For every species of poisonous snake, basically 4, there are several species of non-poisonous snake that color mimic or even behavior mimic the poisonous snake as a defense mechanism so that you and I or other animals believe for just a moment that it might be the real thing, and that moment gives the real snake or the defensive snake an opportunity to escape. So the copperhead has the corn snake and some other species of snakes that look very much like him. There are several subspecies of copperheads, but this particular kind is a very broad-ranging snake that lives in this area here on our ranch. They are not as large as the rattlesnake. In fact, they're the smallest of the 3 pit vipers, the cottonmouth in between and the rattlesnake on the large end. But this is an average-sized copperhead. He's probably about 20 inches long. A very large specimen would be 39, 40 inches or so in length. This snake is kin to the water moccasin, is often caught near the water on the creeks and river systems of this area. He has the same basic venom, a hemotoxic, blood-attacking venom that the rattlesnake and the water moccasin have. So his bite is not more or less venomous. In fact, it's basically the same type of venom, and therefore the symptoms of a snake bite of this type would be similar to that of a rattlesnake. However, because he's small, his venom gland is usually smaller than an average rattlesnake, let's say. His fangs are a little shorter, and his strike is less distance in length because of his shorter length. He also has less powerful jaws because his head is smaller, and therefore of the 3 pit vipers, this is probably considered the least serious bite of any of the snakes. But this snake ranges throughout the southern United States, and some of the species that are the largest are up in the Tennessee, Kentucky area, up in there. The broad-banded copperheads in this area are among the smaller ones. East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi has a southern copperhead that is a little pinker colored than this copper that you see here. But there's no mistaking the copperhead. Certainly he looks different from the rattlesnake and the cottonmouth in every way. But it's also interesting to note that a newborn copperhead is identical to a newborn water moccasin. In fact, if you put both litters in the same box, it would be almost impossible to identify the 2 different species at a glance when you first look at both types. The cottonmouth, of course, is a little bit larger snake than the copperhead. He's also perhaps the most aggressive of the poisonous snakes that we have here in the United States. He's one of the few snakes that actually establishes a territory, often mates for life, and he and his mate stake out an area on a creek or river that becomes their hunting territory. Any animal that comes into that area is subject to being checked out. That includes you and I or any other animal. And so many times we think the cottonmouth is coming to attack us, when actually, being a territorial animal, he's simply coming to see what's going on in his territory. Now, this is a rather large cottonmouth. They don't get as big as you think they do. A very large specimen would probably be about 4 feet long, and this snake here is about 3.5 feet long. So they don't get a lot bigger, but they are a very powerful snake. They live in a very harsh environment on the creeks and rivers and swamps, and therefore, because they live in a harsh environment, they also develop a rather harsh personality. This snake doesn't strike like a copperhead or a rattlesnake. They take jabs, quick jabs, and get back cocked ready for a second or third strike. When a cottonmouth strikes, he often holds on, digging in his fangs, making sure he gets a good bite. And if you're unfortunate enough to be bitten by one of these, you often have to pull the snake off of you because he doesn't let go. But the cottonmouth probably has more snakes that mimic his looks and his behavior than any other snake. The common water snakes that live in this area and throughout the South, called the Nerodia, the genus name, the diamondback water snake, the fish snake, and various other local names, mimic the cottonmouth so well that you almost have to be an expert to notice the difference at a glance. Of course, I've messed with snakes enough to know that I can identify one of these guys from 100 yards away, and the average person sees a snake and it's simply a poisonous snake because it's in the water. And that's not true. The vast majority of snakes that you see in the water are the non-poisonous species. This guy here is a very secretive snake. He does not live on the big lakes and large impoundments in any large numbers because he doesn't like people. He will go out of his way to avoid contact with water skiers, fishermen, boathouses, and the snakes you see sunning themselves on the logs and swimming near the boathouses, by and large, are not going to be cottonmouths. They'll be the Nerodia water species of some kind or another. They are aggressive too, and as I said earlier, they will go to great lengths to mimic the water moccasin, so much so that they will do everything you've ever heard of that you use to identify a poisonous snake. It's interesting that a lot of people say, well, the poisonous snakes have a triangular-shaped head. They do. When the Nerodia, the non-poisonous water snake, is excited or is threatened by your presence, he will make his head even more triangular than that of the cottonmouth, and trying to convince you that he is a cottonmouth water moccasin when he's not. You've also heard that the cottonmouth has a stubby tail. Well, you're looking at a cottonmouth right now, and his tail isn't all that stubby, but the Nerodia even has a more stubby tail than the cottonmouth water moccasin. One quick way to identify the moccasin from the non-poisonous species is the fact, again, when he swims, he's completely out of the water. You can see his whole body. The non-poisonous snakes that try to look like the cottonmouth swim with their head out and maybe a couple of other parts of their body, but not the whole body. Another way to tell is you'll notice the belly scales of the cottonmouth. He has bands that go completely around his body so that his stomach is not plain yellow. The non-poisonous water snakes have a plain yellow stomach with no markings on it, and for that reason, you can use that to identify the snake. Unfortunately, if you're close enough to turn them over or look at the belly, then you're probably already in deep trouble. Another thing to remember in the way of snake identification for the layman is that the pupils of the copperhead and the water moccasin and the rattlesnake are elliptical pupils. They're a little split that goes up and down like that of a cat. The non-poisonous snakes have a round pupil like you and I have, but if you're close enough to see what shape their pupil is, you're also in deep trouble. The cottonmouth also tends to have a pink-colored tongue, like the copperhead, and the non-poisonous water snakes usually have a gray or black tongue. But there again, if you're close enough to see the color of their tongue, you may be close enough for action should it be the real thing. Now, don't make any mistake about it. All snakes can bite. The water snakes that are non-poisonous, and we'll show you one in just a moment, are very aggressive, and they will bite you in a split second. The only difference is they are not venomous, and they don't have the fangs that these guys here have. So just because they're not poisonous doesn't mean they won't hurt you. They can give you a very nasty bite. Let's look at the Nerodia water snake beside the cottonmouth for a moment, and I think you can see the comparison that I made a minute ago. This snake here is the non-poisonous water snake called the Nerodia. Now, you'll notice when I get him shook up that his head will become very triangular, in fact, more triangular than the cottonmouth. He will try to bite, and he's very aggressive. He'll open his mouth and make a big white-colored mouth there so that you'll believe he's a cottonmouth. And I can tell you that he will definitely bite you. If you step on him lightly, he will swing around and bites you repeatedly, and he has very large teeth because he uses those teeth to catch fish, and therefore his teeth have to be quite sharp and quite effective at holding on to another animal. You notice he can crawl much faster too than the cottonmouth, which is a very slow snake. Okay, now we've seen the copperhead and the cottonmouth water moccasin and another rattlesnake. I wanted to take this opportunity while I had this pretty specimen out here to show you a strike sequence. Now you'll notice I only have on rubber boots, but I've never had a snake bite through the rubber, so we'll hope it doesn't happen today. This rattlesnake is just like the one we had in there earlier, but a little bit larger. This is a western diamondback. He's laying there in his semi-camoed position, barely rattling because he knows I'm too close, but he's not sure what I'm up to yet. But once I kick at or poke at the snake, he's going to try to bite me, because by that point he knows he's under attack and it's time to take care of himself. There's a good fang shot there, and fortunately he didn't go through the boots. But you'll notice, even as he strikes, he's trying to crawl away and escape. He's not really interested in getting in a fight with me if he can help it. Keep dragging him back out here till he gets ready to fight again. We're purposely not doing any daredevil parts of this show. I've been in shows where I've climbed in a sleeping bag with snakes, and we've done lots of different kinds of activities concerning rattlesnakes, but I don't think those are necessarily productive toward education, and nobody in their right mind is going to climb in a sleeping bag out in nature that's got rattlesnakes in it. But you'll notice that he's not willing to get in too big of a fight with me. As long as I keep the sole of my boot exposed to him, there's no way he can strike through that. And this is a pretty large rattlesnake here. He's easily capable of striking above a boot, so we don't want to expose our shin bone to him. But what you see here is a rattlesnake that's finally been cowed down. He tried to escape half a dozen times. I kept dragging him back, and now he's got his head hidden down inside of his coil. Remember, they don't have any eyelids, so he can't close his eyes. In order to cover out the outside world, he has to cover it with his body. He's quit rattling, and just like the ostrich in the cartoons that sticks its head down in the sand, he now believes he's invisible. I can actually reach down and touch this snake. As long as he keeps his head inside that coil, he's completely invisible. In his mind, he can't be seen. So I'm actually stroking the snake that you just saw striking at me a moment ago. The fourth kind of poisonous snake that we mentioned earlier is the coral snake, the very bright red, yellow, and black snake that you hear a lot about. Now, the coral snake is a different breed of cat. This snake is a neurotoxic snake. His venom is like that of a cobra or a mamba. It attacks the nervous system. This is a very deadly bite, unlike the rattlesnake and the copperhead and the water moccasin. The bite, however, is very difficult to administer. This snake does not have the fangs that you saw in the other specimens that we had. Instead, he has tiny little teeth, and he has a groove in his jawbone, or a little canal. When he strikes, he has to hold on and penetrate the skin several times with those tiny teeth, and the venom simply flows through the mouth into the canal and down into the open wound that he creates by biting with those little teeth. What you hear me saying is that it's often very difficult to be bitten by a coral snake. Most people that are bitten by a coral snake are actually holding the snake, oftentimes a small child who's picked up a brightly colored animal, taking it back to a parent or adult to show them, and carrying it for some distance, and therefore the snake has an opportunity to bite several times. I can tell you that the coral snake bite is not quite as painful as that of a hemotoxic snake, but since it attacks the nervous system, its symptoms are very different and often much more deadly to contend with than the rattlesnake. But the coral snake is also rather docile. He is not one of those that tries to attack you out of the clear blue. It's just that you'd never want to pick up a bright red, yellow, and black colored snake. Now, as we said earlier, there are lots of species of snakes that mimic the poisonous snakes, and the coral snake has several species. Around here, we have the long-nosed snake, which is red, yellow, and black. The difference is the sequence of the colors. There's an old poem that they tell you in the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that goes, red on yellow, kill the fellow, red on black, friendly Jack. My opinion is that if you rely on poems to tell the difference of a snake, and you're excited over snakes to begin with, you're going to get out there and you're going to say, well, is it red on yellow, kill the fellow, or red on yellow, friendly fellow? And by the time you sort through the poetry, you're bitten on the hand by a coral snake. So never use poetry to determine what kind of snake you're messing with. If you see a red, yellow, and black snake and you're not absolutely sure, then don't pick it up by any means, because the coral snake is often a docile snake, but once picked up and handled, he may turn around and bite you. This is a very beautiful snake. This particular specimen is about to go through a shed, and so his colors are not nearly as vivid as he would be if he had just shed his skin and was very bright color. But this is, make no mistake about it, this is a very dangerous snake here. Even though he's pretty, he can cause you lots and lots of trouble. When we're out hunting snakes, we often hunt from the boat in the water. We look for a swamp or a creek, and we watch the shoreline very closely because most snakes feed on the water, looking for frogs or small rodents that live near the water. And it's a lot easier to carry your equipment and ease along in the boat than it is to do a lot of walking. And the more reed and water cover plants there are, the better it is for snakes. Okay, we've got appears to be a small rat snake over there in the bushes. And we'll ease over here and get in position to see if we can catch him. The kind of equipment we're using in the boat is a set of tongs so we can grip the snake carefully without letting him escape into the heavy weeds. And we'll have to manipulate the boat into position very quietly here to get a grip on that snake. He's laying in the bushes right over here hiding. Change out our equipment here. Okay. We've got him. It's a small Texas rat snake. They're pretty aggressive when they're first caught, and they'll bite you pretty good. This one appears to be out here trying to catch him a frog. Now this is also a constrictor snake like the bull snake. He's a handsome little specimen. And these snakes will get to lengths in excess of 7 feet. They put out a pretty strong musk as part of their defense mechanism too, so he's busy smelling good right now. We'll put him in our collection box and see if we can find some more out here on the river. Snakes can be caught virtually anywhere. Sometimes they're in culverts right in town. Sometimes they're out in the grass along the creek banks and certainly up on the hills and in the rocks, but we catch them almost everywhere throughout this part of the country. Here's a nice bull snake right here in front of me. He started hissing as soon as I got close. This is a nice specimen here. Now these snakes, oh yeah, he's a beaut. These snakes here are designed to look a lot like a western diamondback rattlesnake. This is a 6-footer here or better. Now, occasionally when you're real lucky on a snake hunt, you catch a very unusual snake. We have here an albino western diamondback. He looks like he's about to shed, so he's sort of brown in part of his head, but there's no markings on this snake of any kind. He's a snow white stomach, which means when he sheds, his back will be snow white also. And he's a pretty specimen. An albino like this is very rare because they're killed and eaten by hawks and owls and roadrunners as a small snake because they have no camouflage, and the only way they can survive is by being extremely mean. We've seen some of the snake catching techniques. Let's talk about what happens if you're a poor performer when you're collecting snakes. The snake bite. Everyone always asks, well, what do you do if you're bitten by a snake? How does the venom affect you, and what should you do in the way of first aid? And what are the likely outcomes from that bite? It's a long answer, but very quickly, snakes have venom for basically 2 reasons. First of all, rattlesnakes are very slow. So are water moccasins and copperheads. And they lay in ambush near a trail. They capture their food partially by laying in ambush and striking out very quickly and putting a minute amount of venom into, let's say, a small mouse. Well, the mouse stumbles down the trail to die, and obviously a dead mouse is much slower than a live mouse, so the snake uses his venom to help him capture his food supply. But something else is going on that's very important for the mouse and the snake. The venom of the rattlesnake, copperhead, and water moccasin, we said, is a hemotoxic poison. It is an anti-blood coagulant, and it actually kills the mouse by making his blood very thin and watery, so thin that it will not stay within the capillaries or blood vessels of the mouse, and so he crawls off and bleeds internally and he dies. While he's bleeding, he becomes soft and squishy and jello-like, which makes it much more simple to be swallowed whole by an animal that doesn't chew its food or take bites out of it one at a time. Now, if you and I are bitten by that snake, say on the leg or the hand, the area of the snake bite is going to do the same thing that happened to the mouse. The blood is first going to turn very thin and watery. Oftentimes, the first symptom of a serious snake bite is free bleeding back out of the wound. Secondly, the internal bleeding will cause swelling, a darkening or bruising effect, sometimes blistering, and many times the hot burning sensation associated with a snake bite is perhaps the scariest part of the whole experience. But remember, the good news is that many, many times, without tagging a percentage to it, I would say the majority of the time, a snake bite is not venomous. Under those conditions, you're very lucky, and you should use that as a good experience to improve your snake catching techniques. But if you're unfortunate enough to receive a venomous bite, you will know when you have venom. In the first few seconds of a snake bite, the hot burning sensation, the free bleeding, bruising, swelling, and all the symptoms that go with it transpire very rapidly. The venom is ravenous on the warm-blooded blood cells, and it will cause some serious symptoms in a short period of time. What do you do? Well, I'm not going to stand here and tell you not to panic and to stay calm, even though you should if you can. but most people bitten by a snake are going to do exactly like you can imagine in your wildest imagination. One of the schools of thought in snake bite is the idea of cutting and sucking the snake bite. I personally try to avoid cutting a snake bite because it can cause some serious symptoms in and of itself. For example, whenever you make an incision or cut, like they used to show in, say, the Boy Scout manual, series of small X's, then you have nerves and tendons and ligaments and muscles and blood vessels and lots of nice things underneath the surface of the skin that you're liable to cause injury to, and the snake bite may have been a minor or a lack of a major bite. Additionally, when you cut, the blood surface area is increased, and therefore it gives the venom a larger area to interact with the body and might be a more severe bite than had you not cut it. Believe me, in a snake bite where venom is associated with it, the venom can be extracted back out of the hole caused by the fang and the other teeth that might have also cut you in that bite. But the two schools of thought in snake bite, one is the cut and suck method. If you're going to try to suck the venom out of a snake bite, you should do so in the first few seconds of the bite. Again, the venom is harmless in your mouth. If you can reach the area of the bite, then just by all means start sucking it immediately with your own mouth if you can, or that of a friend if you can't reach the area. Some of the commercial snake bite kits on the market, like the Extractor, have a very powerful pump action, much more powerful than the mouth, and they can be used to extract the venom from a snake bite by putting it on the bite area and sucking the poison back out. Some of these bite kits have a very, very strong suction action and can do wonders at pulling out venom. Every millimicron of venom that you're able to extract from a snake bite makes it that much better in terms of later symptoms. The other school of thought is the freeze method. In other words, put a light restricting band above and below the bite area, put a cold compress directly on the wound itself to slow down the absorption rate of the body. The compress should not be something that is restrictive like a tourniquet, but instead just to slow down the surface flow of fluids and therefore the absorption rate of the venom. In both cases, whether you choose to suck and cut or whether you choose a cold method to slow down the absorption rate, the end product of a snake bite treatment is get to medical treatment as soon as you can do so safely. I can assure you the newer technique on the market, the electroshock method of snake bite treatment, is still very new. My own opinion and experiences are that it can't hurt to try it. A snake bite is very, very painful, and while we're not sure exactly biologically what happens in the changing of the polarity of the venom in the system to perhaps take the toxicity out of it, nonetheless, the new method may be of help. I've certainly used it in my own bites and other bites and have seen some potential success. So cut and suck, the freeze method or getting it very cold, or the electroshock, there's not much you can do with a snake bite other than that in the way of first aid. By the way, remember to try to take the snake that bit you with you to the hospital. It may save you a lot of grief if they find out later it was a non-poisonous snake. Beyond that, your kidneys, your liver, your bladder, your sweat glands, your bowels must eliminate the venom from within the body. There's no such thing as getting an anti-venom shot, or anti-venene as they call it, and dusting off and saying, well, that wasn't so bad, and get up and go home. It doesn't work that way. There's no shortcut treatment. The best method is don't get bitten to begin with by using your head and good common sense when you're out collecting specimens.
We hope you have enjoyed Program 1 of the exciting real world of snakes with Bob Popplewell. For more information about snakes or a product brochure, please write the Brazos River Rattlesnake Ranch at the address on your screen.